Q&A. I also like to ask you, before we are starting the panels, we are going to run a few Mentimeter questions, so prepare your mobiles to answer the Mentimeters after John's introductions. So I think all know John. He is one, in the end, of the key thought leaders with regard to sustainability, inventing the key buzzword of the triple bottom line back in 1994. And one of the key sustainable business leaders, what we see in the space of sustainability. And I also know that John has consulted quite a few of our member companies in different roles and advisory panels so far. John is also the founder of Volans Ventures, and he was the co-founder of one of the earliest sustainability consultancies, Sustainability. Quite interestingly, back in 2018, he made something like a product recall with regard to the triple bottom line, calling to rethink and deeper integration for sustainability into capitalism itself. And I think these are parts we are discussing here quite closely. How do we get this whole ESG information much, much closer into decision-making, financial planning, and financial accounting? John, I think you are already on the line. At least I have seen a sign. So welcome to the VBA conference. I know that John was following our work over the last years, also as part of the Novartis community, as an advisor. And we are more than happy, John, to listen to you for the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then opening this up for questions from the audience. John, the floor is yours. Does it work out? This is a conference of technical challenges. Plan B is that we are going for the next coffee break.
So what time do we start? 1:15 or after?
Let's see. Good?
And will somebody introduce me, or do I just simply go straight into the slides?
I think John can't hear us. Has someone his mobile to call him?
I can hear you.
Good, John. John, you have been already introduced. Thanks for joining us, John. And we are looking forward to your presentation. And we will have a few minutes after your insights to bring back some Q&As from the audience. Just, John, I don't know if you can see us all. We have around, I would say, 70 people in the room. Some of them what you know in person. But now we are really looking forward to your introductions and to your speech, John. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm very sorry not to be with you, but in a way, it's just as well, because I came back from Corsica about 2 weeks ago with a very bad COVID-like cough, so you wouldn't want to have heard that. So I'm thrilled to be nonetheless part of the VBA conference, and I'm just going to run through some very quick slides to give you some reflections on this question that I was set, which is, how do we cut through complexity? So if I could have the first slide, please. So my simple answer is that part of what you're focusing on in this event is measurement, all good stuff, and management, very intimately linked. I'm going to say that in a way, all of that is helpful, necessary condition and all the rest of it, but we need to now get into the field of market design, which will also need management, also need measurement, but will be quite different. Next slide, please. So some of you will know GlobeScan, some of you will know my old company, Sustainability, now part of ERM. Some of you will also know that every year, and sometimes more frequently, those organizations do a survey of sustainability people around the world. In July, so next month, we're going to publish the results of a survey, one of the biggest that GlobeScan and ERM have ever undertaken. And it's largely on very different questions because we face such extraordinary circumstances in the wider world at the moment. And on the right there with the bullet points, I'm not going to read all of this out, but there was one striking conclusion from the survey, which is international, around 1,000 respondents. 93% in total feel that the sustainability agenda needs significant change. And as you'll see from the pie chart, 56%, so significantly over half, feel we need radical change. So that's the context within which I'll be talking. The book on the left, Tickling Sharks, is my review of 50 years to date. I think that the next 10 to 15 years are going to see much more change, for good and bad, than the last 50. But if I could have the next slide, please. So this is a feature of the landscape these days, whether we like it or not. I don't, but it's very striking that there are people in political power these days who believe that simply by blocking their eyes to reality, the reality will go away. And you certainly see that with Donald Trump and climate change and his attempts now to neuter the Environmental Protection Agency, to remove the NOAA, the sort of Oceans and Atmosphere Agency, and so on. I think this will not go away, it will not end. I think it will in some ways accelerate, particularly if he gets away what he's trying to do with Iran at the moment. But nonetheless, I feel more optimistic in some ways than I have done for the last 10 to 15 years. And the reason is I think that Donald Trump is demonstrating how system change can happen. It's just happening in ways that we don't approve of. The question now is how do we drive system change, systemic change, in the right directions? And that broken promises, Bloomberg Business Week front cover, is just a note in passing to say that we will continue to see major companies backing off from public commitments that they've made. And, you know, many of these companies that we've worked with, I think it's inevitable. I think they'll regret it in some ways. I think when the inevitable recovery happens, we're in an ESG recession, you could call it a sustainability recession as well. When the recovery does happen, and it'll happen within the Trump term, however long that proves to be, you are going to see these pressures coming through harder and faster than ever before. Next slide, please. And I just want to run through a couple of further options about how we might get our brains around the complexity in this wider world. And my own personal opinion is that things are not going to get simpler anytime soon. I think that as the old order starts to fall apart and new ones start to emerge, the complexity can only grow. And the critical question is, can we see through that complexity to what's going on? I was in Spain when their grid and Portugal's grid almost melted down. And the initial reaction was, oh, it's renewable energy and so on. When you actually look now, as we're able to do, at what happened, a lot of it is about acutely bad planning, really bad mismanagement with respect to any Spanish people in the electricity and space in the room. But are we going to see more or less of these sorts of things, systemic shocks? I think we're going to see more of them, because as more renewables pile in, more clean technology comes in and so on, the traditional incumbent infrastructures will struggle. And I think that's unfortunate, but I think that's the reality. Can we have the next slide, please? Which is another option, which is the one that the World Economic Forum takes, among others. I was 7 years on the faculty of the World Economic Forum. And what they tend to do, as many of you will know, and been some of you will be quite intimately connected with these mapping exercises, trying to see what the dynamics are, the system dynamics around particular issues. This one happened to be oceans, and as part of London Climate Action Week, we're doing a big session later on today here in London on oceans. This is just one attempt to catch those complexities. So next slide. So mapping will be part of all of this, but equally, I think one of the ways that I think certainly I learn about complexity, and I think more of us need to learn about how to manage complex systems, complex operating environments, is to get out there and experience those systems. So for example, about 3 weeks ago with some colleagues from Generation Investment Management, Patagonia, Oxford University, I was in Amazonia, and with Natura, the cosmetics and beauty company, visiting parts of their supply chain in Amazonia. And it's quite interesting when you see people in chief sustainability officer roles, let alone chief financial officer roles or CEO roles, how few of those people have gone out to see practically, face-to-face, in the real world, some of the challenges and complexities that we now face. And within them, and coming up behind them, market opportunities. That diagram in the middle of this photograph is just taken from a strategy document that Natura will launch next month, and it's about how they're now embracing regeneration. And I do think that responsibility, resilience, regeneration, these themes will become increasingly important. Next one, yes, thank you. Next slide. Brilliant. So when we're in such complex situations, the obvious solution, Alexander the Great practiced, to just pick up the biggest, sharpest thing that you can get your hands on and cut through the Gordian knot. So the question is, who's doing that in a way? And who's cutting through complexities? So I could have the next slide, please. And this is my attempt. On the right-hand side, you have a diagram that I've been mapping myself since 1994. The sort of pressure waves, societal pressure waves, in particularly the OECD world, the rich world, developed world countries, if we can still call them that. And these waves have gone up and down. We're coming out of one of those at the moment. It's the ESG and to some degree impact wave. The thing I've learned over the decades in studying these pressure waves is the really important work gets not at the peak of a wave, a pressure wave, but during the down waves. And that's where we now find ourselves. I think we're going into a period where not just ESG, not just sustainability, not just clean tech, not just climate, all of our agenda will be contested because it has real consequences for people with vested interests, strandable assets, and so on. So I think we face a sort of crucible period in which it won't simply be about your impact measurements or how you're managing your complex systems or complexity in your systems or whatever. This is going to become increasingly political. So the question in my mind has been, who has cut through all that complexity? And normally I just build this image, but you see the answer almost before we start. The answer is China. And whether you look at solar, wind, batteries, electric vehicles, drones, artificial intelligence, precision fermentation, artificial intelligence, I could go on and on, rare earth metals and minerals. China has seen the future. It's got a quite clear view of where that future is going to take us, and it's investing in the industries that will basically be the commanding heights of the new economy. And on the left there, you just have a recent diagram. I just saw this last week, which shows the electricity production statistics for a number of countries. And what you'll see, without going into any great detail, is that China now produces more electricity in a year than Japan, the United States, and the European Union put together. So when we think about this agenda of ours, we're going to have to, whatever happens with the US, China, geopolitical contretemps, we're going to have to pay a lot more attention to what China is doing. Next slide, please. So just towards the conclusion, I just want to say a number of things about what I think the next steps for us all will include. Firstly, I don't think the sustainability, I don't think the climate, I don't think the biodiversity agendas are now set in concrete. I think they may need massive disruption. In fact, I think the Trump insult and assault on our agenda is actually a big opportunity to rethink and to come back different and to come back stronger. So I think we've got to build on the best of environmental, social, and governance thinking, and on the right there you have some of the themes that are increasingly covered in that context. We've got to embrace financial valuation of impact, negative, positive, net, and all the rest of it. I'm still uncomfortable with that approach, but I think it has to be done if we're going to make this real in our economies. And then third point is, you know, people are fretting a lot about the energy and water footprint of artificial intelligence. I don't think we can do sustainability. I don't think we can manage our complex interacting economic, social, environmental systems without AI. It has to be the right sort of AI, designed and operated in the right way, but it's absolutely essential, I believe, going forward. Next slide, please. This is the second out of three options. I think if I'm known for anything, I've coined language. I've come up with new terms like green consumer or triple bottom line, or even sustainability. I had a hand in popularizing that, which is all fine. And new language helps people think new thoughts. But I think we're at the point where new language often gets in the way. Jargon gets in the way. As this becomes political, we've got to be much clearer about what we want people in different roles in our societies and economies to do, and how we think that's best going to be done. So we've got to normalize the language of change. So impact, I think, will work, but it'll work still largely in the technical sphere. We've got to get people who, we live in a world of social influences and all the rest of it. I don't think that's positive, but nonetheless, we've got to work with that. We've got to get these people talking about our issues as well. And as I said already with the case of Amazonia, we've got to get people out from their screens, out from behind their desks, out into the real world, which we've sort of forgot to do after the COVID pandemic. We've got to get out there and experience complex systems and meet some of the people actually manage them. Then the final next step, please, next slide, is this one. And it's about how we not simply take the markets as we know them and as we operate within them, and start to think about how do we redesign markets and eventually capitalism in such a way that rather than the right decisions being a matter of corporate citizenship or corporate responsibility, it's the default setting. Why wouldn't you do this? It's what the markets dictate. And just two diagrams here, just I want to go through very quickly. First one on the left is the overtaking in the United States particularly, but also worldwide, of horses by the private automobile. And this is an X-curve, and I will see a lot more about X-curves in the year to come. But the really interesting thing was, in the space of 6 years, New York City went from a position where you would look at one street, and there are photographs to show this, where every vehicle was horse-drawn except one, which was a car. Within 6 years, every vehicle was a car except for one horse-drawn vehicle. This is where we find ourselves. The pace of change is going exponential. Our management strategies, our impact metrics will have to reflect that. And just on the right there, you have Norway. I was in Oslo a couple of months ago, and I used this slide then, which showed 82% electric vehicles in the country. Well, Norway's a peculiar example of a country. It has oil and gas wealth, among other things. But it's now over 90%. And again, what you're seeing here is the influence of government coming in and restructuring markets. So as you talk about management and as you talk about measurement, I do encourage you to also to think about market context within which all of this happens and how we best change those market configurations and dynamics. The last slide just has a QR code if you want to follow up anyway. So next slide, please. Do follow up. Thank you very much for your attention. Back into the room. If there are any questions, just to say my email is john@volans.com. If we don't get a chance to have a conversation here, do use it afterwards. Back to you.
Many, many thanks, John, for your insights. So we just take a couple of minutes with regard to questions directly to you, John. I hope you can hear as well. Who wants to break the ice? Please go. Aaron Kramer from BSI, I think a person you know quite well, John.
I know him and love him. Hello, Aaron. I hope it's a stinger of a question.
I'll do my best.
I can't hear it.
There we go. The public has lost faith in the market economy. How do we deal with that? I think some of that's, addressing that is in part implicit in what you're saying, but I think without changing that, I don't see how these transitions, well, let's put it this way, the transitions will be far slower than they need to be. How do we tackle that?
Aaron, I wish I had an answer, and I've been watching with some alarm the attitudinal polls in the United States over time, where younger people are increasingly swinging away from the market as the answer to anyone's questions. I think that's extremely dangerous. I think that the market is completely dysfunctional at the moment, but there's no reason why it necessarily should be. But we have to have a longer-term vision. We have to have stamina, political stamina, and we have to do the politics. And you know full well that whether we like it or not, this agenda of ours, which has largely been, and I've been complicit in this, has been, let's focus on companies because we can understand companies and their boards and their brands and their business models and their supply chains. And, there's been a lot of work to be done there, a lot of good work continuing to be done. And BSR, has done some fantastic work in that space. But I think unless and until we really get into that, so what are markets for and who's designing them and how do we start to play that game rather differently, I think we're going to be stuck in the sort of, if I may say it, mess that we're often finding in ourselves in those days, in these days. To your question, I don't precisely know how we redesign markets to the best effect. What I'm trying to do at the moment is talk to people whose business that is, and any suggestions from the room on who else we or I should be talking to, very welcome. But Aaron, I look forward to a conversation on some of this sooner rather than later.
We're waiting for the solutions. Fran, please.
Well, if anyone had it, they'd be the Zuckerberg of the future, or but unfortunate example, perhaps. But this is not a trivial challenge that Aaron has articulated here, and I don't think anyone properly has the answers. But we've got a very narrow window of opportunity in which to develop our counter blast to what's going on in certain quarters, like the White House at the moment. So I think it's a collective challenge, and we've got to work on it together. I'm interested in finding the answers. I don't yet have them.
Well, hello, John. I'm Francisco Ortin from the Value Balancing Alliance. I saw that in one of your lists, you're including financial valuation as one of the key things that have to develop, scaled. Could you develop a little bit more how you envision that in the current or next waves of sustainability?
Well, some of you, Novartis may well be in the room, but for 5 years I helped Sonia Hout there, thinking about how do you, in a pharmaceutical company context, put more advanced, more credible financial valuations on different forms of impact. What I learned from that is it is, excuse the language, but bloody difficult. I mean, it is really a headache to do some of this work, but it has to be done. The difficulties very often come when you try and trade off between different forms of value. And I think very often what we're finding is these things are not directly, accountants might say, fungible. You can't simply, one form of value is not a direct proxy for another form of value. So there's got to be a lot of conversation around this so that the stakeholders who are directly or indirectly affected by this not only understand what all of this is about, but are directly involved in shaping the valuation methods. I think ultimately there's going to be a limitation on how far we can push financial valuation. I think, for example, a stable climate, healthy ecosystems and a biosphere around the world, you can put tens of $trillion valuations on that, but in a way, in the end, it's sort of meaningless if it then gets traded off against other multi-tens of $1 trillion budgets or investments or whatever. But I think it's a game that we have to play. I think in a capitalist and a market-driven society, it can be effective, but we've got to do it with a very clear sense of why we're doing it, what we're trying to achieve from all of that, and try and make sure that it isn't simply co-opted by financial wizards using the latest forms of AI to just run away and create wealth in new stroke old ways. But Francisco, I mean, again, as your conversations go on through the day and through the network beyond, I'd love to see your sort of conclusion. So all I'm saying is, I think financial valuation is the future. I think it's not a trivial task at all. I think it's a bit of a headbanger. I hope AI might help in some ways. I also think economists are going to have to play an increasingly important role in all of this, God help us. But I think economists are themselves one of the least evolved professions in the world at the moment. There are lots of exceptions out there, but there's a hell of a lot of work still to be done in this space. Back to you.
Thank you. We take one last question, please.
Yes. I don't know if you see us. Alix Champris from Visman. We met a few years ago.
Yes, hello.
You might remember. No, I have a question. You said multiple times you think financial valuation is the future. And I'm trying to connect the dots. I read your book, yeah. Green Swans, and we discussed it. In Green Swans, you say you want to withdraw the triple bottom line principle. And if I understood your reasoning, the main reason was that the triple down methodology thinking puts companies in the incremental improvement path instead of the green swan disrupting path where I have to land like in multiple years. So my worries is like financial valuation for what I've seen and for the pilot we did is very much about incremental improvements, right? It gives you a picture of today and not where you have to be like in 10 or 20 years. How do you connect that trade-off?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I look forward to a continuing conversation. I've just come back from speaking at a conference in London's Docklands, and I sat between Andrew Steer, who used to run the Bezos Earth Fund, and the guy who's now chairman of the National Wealth Fund, which is Britain's, the UK's attempt to come up with a sovereign wealth fund. And so to your question, I think that there are financial institutions out there who can, because they're philanthropic or because they have a longer term horizon than traditional private financial markets, they can think a bit differently. But just very quickly, for people in the room who don't understand what I meant by a green swan, you remember Nassim Nicholas Taleb talking about black swans, things that come out of the blue, have a massive impact. We don't properly understand them afterwards. So those are exponential challenges. They may take us in good directions, they may take us in bad directions. What I try to do with the green swan notion was just simply say, there are a growing number of potentially exponential solutions to some of the very big challenges that our societies, economies, businesses face, things that are attempted to be summed up in the Sustainable Development Goals and so on. The problem is, and exactly as you say, that much of the financial experimentation that is being done is incremental. It's not thinking about that green swan potentiality. And so part of what I'm trying to do is to see who within venture capital, who within private equity, who within sovereign wealth funds are thinking about some of these challenges and the market opportunities associated with them in significantly different ways. The people are there. There are just not enough of them, and they're not properly understood or seen yet. But I mean, if your work has taken you in relevant directions since we last talked, if there are other people in the room or online who are working in this space, I would love to hear from you, because I think this is a really important juncture politically. I think we have, as I said earlier on, a very narrow window. I'm probably talking about 18 months to 2-3 years to get this sorted out and in operation. And I think the financing all of this is absolutely crucial. We have a big meeting tomorrow as part of Climate Action Week on the financial sides of the energy and other wider transitions. If you ask me the question again tomorrow evening, I might have a different answer. But thank you for the question.
Thanks, John. So we are calling you tomorrow evening to see the latest answers from your end. John, many, many thanks for dialing in today, sharing the latest thinking from your end with our community, and we are looking forward, not just Sonia, who is in the room here, to connect with you and to drive this work forward. Many, many thanks, John.
Good luck with the rest of the event, and I would love to hear headline results a little bit later. And hello, Sonia. Bye, everyone.
We'll come back to you.